All right. Hello, everyone. So before we get started, Third Place Books would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded ancestral land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the Duwamish people and the land itself. So welcome, everyone, to our virtual event space. My name is Allie. I'm a bookseller at our LFP location, and I'm your host for today. I am so excited to be introducing Carrick McManus, Ruth Ware, and Holly Jackson here to discuss You'll Be the Death of Me and One by One. But before we get into the good stuff, I want to say on behalf of all of us here at Third Place Books, thank you all so much for tuning in. For those of you who may not know, we are an independent bookstore with 3 locations in the Seattle area. And as much as we miss having these events in our bookstores, it has been such a delight to expand this online program to connect readers and authors in a virtual space around the world. So thank you all so much for tuning in and, of course, for buying books. Your support is what makes all of this possible. So if you haven't gotten your hands on copies of any of the books that come up this evening and you would like to, I will be linking books in the chat. For those of you in the Seattle area, come on in. All 3 of our locations are open, or you can, of course, place an order online and come pick them up in the store. Or if you're not local, we do ship. So go ahead and follow those links in chat to our website. While you're over on our website, I definitely encourage you to check out some of our other upcoming events. We have an exciting roster. It's a little sparser than usual with the holiday season, but we've got some really exciting events coming up. If you'd like to stay in touch with our community, you can sign up for our newsletter. It's a weekly update with events and exciting releases, our online book clubs, and of course, follow us on any of the major social media platforms. We are at Third Place Books for the quickest updates and recommendations. So we are here for about an hour, and towards the end, we will be taking questions. So if you have any questions, which we very much hope that you do, go ahead and leave those in the Q&A box, which should be either at the top or bottom of your screen. It is different than the chat box, which I see people are starting to discover. Welcome, Joe. I absolutely invite you to share where you're tuning in from in the chat. We've got authors from near and far today, so it's always fun to see who's here. But when it comes time for questions, please do make sure that those end up in the Q&A so we can most easily find them. While you're in our chat and question spaces, I do want to remind you to please lead with kindness and refrain from any inappropriate behavior or harassment. For anyone interested, there are auto-generated closed captions available from the menu at the top or bottom of your screen. Select the live transcript button to enable or disable them. And finally, should any technical issues arise, we will work as quickly as we can to resolve them. And we so appreciate your patience and understanding. Oh my gosh, look at this chat box. Hello, welcome whole world, it seems like. All right, so now it's time for us to settle in, because without further ado, I am so thrilled to welcome 3 thriller all-stars, starting with Karen McManus, the #1 New York Times, USA Today, and international best-selling author of One of Us is Lying, which was recently adapted for TV. Two Can Keep a Secret, One of Us is Next, The Cousins, and the book of the day, You'll Be the Death of Me, in which 3 old friends reconnect on a ditch day, only to accidentally witness a fellow student's murder. We at Third Place loved this book so much. We chose it for our December Lit Reads box. It was described to me as Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but with murder, which is the most excellent sentence to say out loud. Joining us next, I am so happy to welcome Ruth Ware, the #1 New York Times and Globe and Mail bestselling author of In a Dark, Dark Wood, The Woman in Cabin 10, The Lying Game, The Death of Mrs. Westaway, The Turn of the Key, and One by One. Our mystery and thriller expert, Deborah, called her the master of the contemporary locked room mystery. And Deborah said that she would follow her anywhere, which is high, high praise. Deborah knows everything. In a One by One, Anywhere turned out to be a corporate ski retreat in the Alps, where an avalanche snows in 8 co-workers with their own agendas and secrets. And finally, moderating our festivities today, I am so happy to welcome Holly Jackson, #1, a New York Times bestselling author of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, in which a high school senior sets out to prove her old friend didn't commit the infamous murder he admitted to before his death. This series has been wildly popular, and the finale, As Good as Dead, came out in September, and I can't say a word about it because of spoilers, but it is a wild ride. It's so good. So thank you all so much for being here. I am so excited to listen in on this conversation. If you need anything, of course, give me a shout. I will be listening, and same goes for all of you in the audience. I will be in the chat. And with that, I'm going to pass the stage to you, Holly. Welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for joining. This is actually quite a treat for me because I get to grill two of my favorite authors to read, and they have to answer my questions. So buckle up because it's going to get wild. I mean, they might refuse to answer them, but I've already told them they have to. So I just read both of these books actually the last couple of weeks, and I love both of them. I feel like they're right in your style, and they're just so much fun. So if you're looking for a quick thriller over the holiday season, I definitely recommend You'll Be the Death of Me and One by One. But I am useless at describing books, my own and other people's. So, and actually these books, I feel like they're quite easy to describe because they're both very high concept, I would say. So Karen, can you kick us off and give us your kind of elevator pitch for You'll Be the Death of Me?
Yes, it is, as described in the opening, Ferris Bueller's Day Off meets a murder mystery. So we have three estranged friends who were close in middle school, and their friendship was cemented when they snuck out of a dull field trip and spent the day in Boston together. But they drifted apart, as kids often do at that age. But their senior year, each of them is dreading that school day for particular reasons. And they meet by chance in the parking lot, start to reminisce and decide, you know what, let's recreate this greatest day ever. Let's get out of here, go into Boston. Turns out to be a very poor decision. They run into a classmate of theirs and follow him to what essentially is his own murder scene. They get caught up in this crime. They become suspects. They are on the run at various points from antagonists and from the police, and they need to figure out what really happened.
Oh, see, if you don't want to read that, there's something wrong with you because it sounds brilliant. And Ruth, the same for you. Can you give us your kind of elevator pitch for One by One?
Well, mine isn't as cool as Murder on Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh, it's very cool.
No, I mean my pitch, it's just not. But so all of my books are kind of murder on. So I did like Murder on a Hen Night, Murder on a Cruise, and this one is murder in the French Alps on a corporate retreat. So basically it's 10 co-workers who turn up to this kind of luxurious chalet in this super luxe French resort called Saint-Antoine, and they're there for a corporate retreat to try and thresh out the future of the company. They run this app called Snoop, which is like this up and coming music app that's had this huge buyout offer from, well, it's not stated, but you can imagine like Google or Spotify or someone. And the company's irrevocably split. So half the shareholders want to accept the buyout offer and half of them want to reject it. So they've come to this gorgeous place to try and, figure out what they're going to do. And the book is narrated by Erin, who is like the chalet hostess, and she's in charge of wrangling this group into having a good time. And by Liz, who is a former secretary at the company and who has ended up by a kind of series of weird events with this tiny 1% shareholding, which turns out to be the casting vote in this shareholder standoff. So everything's getting a bit tense and a bit kind of, everyone's starting to get at each other's throats, and Liz is stuck in the middle. So they go out for a day skiing and R&R to try and blow the cobwebs away, and one of the shareholders goes missing. And then there's an avalanche, because obviously if bad stuff happens, you have to have more bad stuff. So
bad stuff happens in threes, isn't that what they say?
Exactly.
But there might be a few more bad stuffs in your book.
There's probably more than 3 bad things in my books.
Yeah.
And having like recently exited corporate America for full-time writing, I can say this is a terrifying setting, a corporate retreat.
I think that was it. I'd been on a fair number of not quite corporate retreats, but kind of work trips. And it's just it's the worst place if you're feeling a bit insecure and stuff, because you can't get away. You're literally trapped 24/7 in this work environment. So yeah, all of my books are about exploring fears and phobias, and this was definitely one for me.
Quite a few of your books have a fear of organized fun almost.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm a very anti-organized fun person. So but there's loads of bad things happen in yours, Karen. How many? I don't even think I could do a tally of the number of people who get. No, I don't want to say any spoilers.
No spoilers.
Okay, no spoilers.
Vaguely say it.
Or just say bad stuff happens to good people.
Accurate.
With both of your books, although Karen, I have to admit something to you. I've never watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So when you keep saying, I know, I'm sorry, shall I just leave?
You have a joy ahead of you.
I wanted to. I was about to watch the trailer before this, and I was like, oh no, I don't want to confuse myself. But so obviously you use that in your elevator pitch, and you say it's like Ferris Bueller's Day Off meets murder. So I wondered, kind of when you were coming up, kind of the very genesis of this book idea, is it the kind of thing where that kind of like media influence was part of like the hook that you came up with first? Because I remember you saying about One of Us Is Lying, the kind of spark of the idea was Breakfast Club, which I also haven't seen.
Holly, oh my God, we gotta, next time I see you, we're going out, we're doing an 80s movie night, and
I plead the fifth. I was born in the 90s, so that's my excuse.
Well, that's it. And honestly, I think a lot of my readers have not seen either movie, and that's fine. I think both, have been around long enough and are sort of cultural touchstones enough that you have a general sense of what they are.
Day Off is about someone who, skipped school for the day. I just don't know the ins and outs. But so when you were coming up with the idea of You'll Be the Death of Me, was it the same case where you were like, oh, I love this film, can I do this film meets murder and make something great from that? Or did that like reference kind of come a bit later once you were further along the process?
No, it was actually, the whole idea came about way back in 2017 when I was on tour in the UK, actually, for One of Us Is Lying. And I was talking on this panel about how my inspiration was The Breakfast Club for that book. And the other panelists started joking with me that I should just add murder to all the 80s movies. So like 16 Candles with murder, Pretty in Pink with murder. And I remember thinking, okay, but Ferris Bueller could actually work because that starts with somebody doing something they're not supposed to do. And that's a pretty good jumping off point for the kind of books I write. But at this point, I was working on several other things. I just tucked it in the back of my mind and didn't really think about it until I turned in The Cousins, a good 2 years later, and thought, okay, what's next? And went back to that, little file of ideas in my brain and thought, okay, what would Ferris Bueller's Day Off plus murder actually look like?
So
and then the story took off from there.
All the credit to that unnamed panelist when you were touring the UK. It wasn't me. I'd love to take credit, but it wasn't me.
It was not you, no. But, I'm actually doing a panel with one of those panelists. E. Lockhart was on that panel with me. And because I was a huge fan of hers at the time, so... And still am, but I was a brand new author who was sitting down with someone who I had comped my book to, and I'm like, hi.
That's always a scary moment. Like me now. Anyway, Ruth, it's your turn for the torture. So I don't know if I've seen you state this anywhere, but reading your book, it gives me a very kind of updated, modern Agatha Christie's kind of, what's that book called?
And Then There Were None.
And Then There Were None.
Yeah.
Me and my literary.
Classic.
I haven't read that one though. It gave me that, it was that kind of vibe, but obviously in the French Alps with lots of modern technology and the kind of modern take on it. Again, was that kind of your jumping off point? Were you thinking, I want to do kind of like an Agatha Christie modern in like kind of locked room setting type thing? Or did the kind of vibe of the Agatha Christie kind of come later in the process?
No, I would say it was there right from the beginning, really. When I wrote my first book, In a Dark, Dark Wood, I wasn't thinking of Christie, but as soon as it came out, people started, I think just because it was a locked room mystery, and although my books are psychological thrillers, they typically have a quite kind of puzzly kind of solution at the heart of them that's quite Christie-ish, I think, in terms of the way the clues sort of snap into place, or at least that's what I'm that's what I'm aiming for when I write the book. And so the book came out and loads of reviewers started to say, oh, you know, this is very Christie-ish. And so I kind of had the choice to either lean back from that or lean into it. And with The Woman in Cabin 10, I very much leaned into it. And that was, as people can probably guess, inspired by things like, you know, Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile. And then I kind of moved away from that for a bit and did a few books that were inspired by other people. And then this, I suppose, is me kind of coming full circle and coming back to Christie and to one of my favorite Christies, which is And Then There Were None, which has, it's just beautifully plotted. And I don't want to give it away for anyone, but it has a brilliant kind of gotcha at the heart of it. But the other influence on it, which is like, I don't usually say in interview because it just gives completely the wrong impression. But the Grand Budapest Hotel film is, it has a funicular and they get cut off by snow, and it's this gorgeous house. So it's not that setting because it's not that sort of, you know, pastel hues and everything.
Wes Anderson-y type vibe.
Yeah, exactly. But it was that I love the idea of, you know, a really remote hotel at the top of a funicular. There's something so amazingly 1920s about it. So,
and actually another parallel between both these books is that the kind of narrative timeline takes place over quite a compressed time. So Karen, You'll Be the Death of Me takes place, well, most of it takes place in one day.
Yes.
And Ruth, I think One by One is what, 3 or 4 days maybe?
yeah, it's like a kind of long weekend, I guess.
Long week, yeah, we love a long weekend. So my question is, did that present any challenges for you compared to other of your books which took place over weeks or months? Did you have to kind of track the hours and work out, oh, do they actually have time to fit all of this into 8 hours or 4 days or whatever? Did you have to have like complicated charts to make sure you were tracking it all, or did you find it an exciting challenge? So Karen, let's kick off with you.
Yeah, this is definitely a challenge. And at first I thought this will be great for me because I'm notoriously bad with time. It's like this running joke with my editor that I do not understand weeks and months. There's always something
like
wrong.
4 Tuesdays in a row or
Yeah,
something.
it's always something. And so I thought, here's a single day. What could go wrong? This is great for me. But of course, the challenge is, how do you fit an entire mystery into a day? And they move around a lot. I did want to have some of that homage to Ferris, who is out and about and moving through the city. So you got to be able to get back and forth through different points. And that's part of the reason why I set it in Boston, which is near where I live. So I could actually trace their route. I kind of mapped it out, figured out, you know, where I want them to be. And then I would take a train, I would drive. Now, mind you, you have to get very fortunate with traffic to make this timeline work. You know, and you can't be waiting around for 10 minutes for a train because it is not going to work. But it's theoretically, it's possible. Yeah. It's an optimistic timeline. But the other challenge was I always like to send my characters on like a growth journey. You know, they kind of learn something through this mystery that changes them at the end. And I thought, how am I supposed to do this? And, you know, it's essentially 12 hours, like 7 in the morning till 7 at night. And I decided the way in was this former friendship that they that had ended for reasons that they don't fully understand, but those reasons have to do with, you know, some of the ways that they present themselves and connect with other people that has caused them trouble up to this point, and it's something that they need to resolve. So when they're able to resolve their friendship and their relationship, they're also able to solve that mystery and move forward.
Yeah, I love that image of you recreating your book, like a little detective, like go, we've got to go find the body. And Ruth, same question with you about the timeline. Did you enjoy the challenge of having a shorter timeline, or was it a pain in the butt?
Well, so I didn't really set myself a timeline when I started out. I knew roughly what was going to happen in terms of, I knew who did it, and I didn't know why actually for a long time. That took a long time to pin down. But I don't really plot. I usually know a couple of key events that happen along the way, but often the actual bones of the plot doesn't sort of fall into place until I'm actually writing. So I never said to myself, this is going to be 4 days. It could have been 24 hours. It could have been a week and a half, you know, corporate retreat, an avalanche. It can take as long as it takes. I mean, I guess I did have a slight ticking clock because there was only so long that the group could plausibly be left up there undisturbed by the avalanche.
At some point.
Yeah, and there is a little bit of jiggery pokery where I sort of explain why they have a little bit longer than maybe they should have done. But no, there was never, I just wrote it and saw how many, and then I'd be like, I guess they better go to bed now. They've been up for a really long time, and I'd make them all trot off to bed. And then it would be like, what are they going to do today?
More mysterious stuff.
More murders. Always more murders.
So there's that saying with writing books where write what you know, which we all know is crap because, well, hopefully, speaking for myself, I've never murdered anyone. I'm not to cast judgment on any of you. But I'm just interested to know, Ruth, we'll start with you. Are you an expert skier? Because you seem to know a lot about skiing in this book, or was it just a lot of research?
I'm not an expert skier, but it's so funny you should say that, because my first book, In a ... Wood, I made the main character a runner, and anybody who knows me will tell you that I do not run. I don't even run for the bus if I can help it, let alone do it for fun. But for ages I had people writing to me these lovely notes saying, you write so well about the joy of running, I can tell you must be a runner, you're really, and I kept having to write back saying, I'm so sorry, I'm not. I just I have a husband who's really active, and I know how he feels when he hasn't had his daily exercise, and that's it. I use my imagination. That's what I do. I'm a writer. So when I wrote this book, I thought I'm going to set it around like a sport or an activity, and literally the only sport that I enjoy is skiing. And I'm not an expert at all. I would say I'm a competent skier. So I can get myself down most runs, not necessarily beautifully. I definitely don't do blacks unless there's literally no other choice, but most other stuff I can get down in reasonable style. So it was something that I didn't have to research. I knew everything that I needed to know. And for anyone who's read the book, this isn't really a spoiler, but there's a sort of terrifying semi-off-piste run at the end of the book which features in a plot point. And that's based on a real run in Val d'Isère, which is called the Hidden Valley. And some friends took me down it, and they said, you'll be fine, it's well within your capabilities. And there's a scene where one of the characters is trying to get down to this run, and it's basically down a sheer hillside covered in very deep snow. And that's all taken from life. That was me standing there on one ski, realizing that she'd made a horrific mistake and this was all going to go very badly wrong. In some situations, I guess write what you know is good advice. But yeah,
so that terror in that kind of last climactic scene was real.
Yes, very much so. I want to find out if Karen has ever ditched school now. Are you allowed to tell us that?
Karen, write what you know. Did you ditch school a lot in high school, did you?
One of the side effects of writing this book that I did not anticipate was having to admit multiple times on camera that, yes, I did.
Ditched. I have never ditched school.
But I will say it was, senior year, end of the year. I had already been accepted into college. So it was about as tame of a ditch as you can get. And there was no murder, not even a small amount. So all
right, I'll let you off. So you are the expert in ditching school, corrupting the youth of today with your...
Done it. Don't do it, children. It was a bad idea.
Stay in school. So both of these books are multiple POV. So Ruth, you have 2 perspective characters, and Karen, you have 3. I was just wondering if you had a favorite perspective character who you kind of fell into their voice much easier, and did you get to one of their chapters and be like, oh, thank God, it's an Ivy chapter now, I'm going to sail away with this, and Mateo's coming later, and he's a nightmare? Or are they just kind of you enjoy all of them, or you just kind of slot into them easily? So Karen, let's start with you.
Yeah, there's always one who comes easiest. And whenever people ask me who my favorite character is, I always say, I don't have a favorite, but I appreciate the ones who make my job easy. And so in One of Us is Lying, that was Nate. It was like he wrote himself. And Two Can Keep a Secret, it was Ellery. And in You'll Be the Death of Me, it was Ivy. And interestingly enough, I always seem to open with those characters. I don't think it's conscious, but it probably is. You know, that's who helps me get started because their voice is very sharp and very clear. So yeah, and I would say Mateo was not a nightmare to write, but Cal was tough. He was tough because he's one of those characters who doesn't know himself very well. And so, you know, presenting his point of view can be challenging until he gets to the point where he understands his own motivations.
Yeah.
I
And
will
Ruth,
say,
I guess both your characters are kind of similar where they are in their life. They're kind of both young women in their early 20s-ish or thereabout. But they're very different and they go on very different journeys. Did you enjoy one over the other particularly?
Not really. I just wanted to say for Karen, because I loved You'll Be the Death of Me, and I very much enjoyed reading it. And normally, when I read a book with multiple narrators, I have one character who drags for me, and I don't skip their chapters, but I end up kind of thinking, oh come. And I really didn't have that with this one, and I thought that was a tribute to you that you made me really care about them all. So that was lovely.
Thank you.
I think Karen did horrible things to all of them.
Yeah, but you know, that's fine.
Equally tormented them.
We're all crime writers here, so that's okay. So when I have never, unlike Karen, who is an expert, I have never written multiple narrator before. I've always written one character, and I started out doing that with this book. And I think part of the reason why I've never done it is because I was always quite scared of not being able to distinguish them, because that is my pet hate as a reader, when you're reading a book with multiple viewpoints and you have to keep flipping back to find out whose chapter you're in, because they merge into one. So I've never done it before, and I wrote the first probably 30,000 words of this book all in Erin's perspective, who is the chalet girl. And it just wasn't working. And I sent it to my agent, hoping that she would say, oh, it's fine, it's absolutely fine. But because she's a good agent, she said, no, it's not working. And I realized it was because Erin is an outsider to the group, the Snoop company, and so she doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't know the machinations of the company and the characters involved, and so she was having to do a lot of figuring stuff out, and also things that just weren't in her character. Like she was having to sort of not quite listen at doors, but there was a lot of overheard conversations because I just needed to convey stuff. Yeah. And it wasn't believable for her character. Like she just wasn't that person. She wouldn't be snooping around, eavesdropping on conversations.
Yeah, so you needed like an insider.
Yeah, so I needed an inside character. So that's where Liz came from. And I don't think one of them was harder to write, but Liz was she was a tougher person's psyche to be inside. In some ways, she's a lot more like me than Erin. I basically gave her all of my insecurities and social awkwardness and all the things that I feel when I go into a party and I'm instantly convinced everyone's looking at me and judging my dress. I sort of loaded all of that on poor Liz. So yeah, in some ways she was a tougher character to write, but I didn't find them from a writerly point of view. I don't think she was tougher. Just psychologically, she was quite a hard person to be inside of.
It felt like a long day when you were writing a Liz chapter, did it? You needed that cup of tea at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it was just more, yeah, exactly. I needed a bit of a reward at the end of it. So.
Some reward chocolate or something. That's how I get through a day of writing. I need a reward. I'm like a child. So, I mean, Karen and I have done a lot of panels together already. And we always get asked the question about whether you're a plotter or a planner. And I know Karen's answer in and out. She knows mine. And Ruth, I know you just said that you don't really plot beforehand, bar a few kind of things, the bones, you kind of work it out as you go along. But I was just wondering, how long does it normally take you from when you start typing, like the first sentence of the book, to get to the end of the draft? How long does that process take you? And do you edit as you go along, or do you just steam through and say, I'll fix stuff later, leave a big gaping plot hole there, I'll come back to it? And yeah, I'm very interested to know this answer. I'm in charge now, so I can get all the answers I've never been able to have. So Karen, let's start with you.
Yeah, if it's going well, if I, sort of feel like I'm understand the story and the characters, I can pound out a first draft in about 2 months. And it tends to be a pretty clean draft. Like I have a hard time moving on from a chapter if I'll leave little things blank, but I can't leave big picture things blank. So I will kind of wrestle it out and figure it out. And I usually do, if it's 3 characters, I'll do the first 3 chapters and be like, okay, where are we? What did I learn about these people? What do I need to set up for the next time around? And I'll just keep cycling through those 3 points of view until I'm sort of at the midpoint and like, okay, are we following what we meant to follow? So I can write it pretty quickly, but it does then require a lot of editing to get it to something that you'd actually want to read.
I'd read your first drafts, Karen. And Ruth, what about you?
So mine normally take a little bit longer, usually between 4 and 6 months, although of late, it's been getting longer just because of, like I've been traveling and touring and doing a lot, but actually the last couple of years, obviously we've been doing none of that. So the last book wrote itself fairly quickly. But so usually about 6 months, but like Karen, I keep going out. And so I get to the end of like the first sort of 3 chapters or so and go back and not quite re-edit, but just sort of check everything's in the right place. So I don't really, people always ask, how many drafts do you do? And I don't want to say I do 1 draft because that makes it sound like I just scribble it off, send it out. But I can't say I do 4 drafts because I kind of edit as I go along. So each paragraph for sure, I've written and rewritten 3, 4, maybe 10 times if it's a difficult paragraph. But when I type the end, that's the point at which I press send to my editor. I don't go back to I read it through just to make sure there's, I haven't put in too many swear words or, there's no really embarrassing spelling mistakes like there and there kind of thing. But pretty much when I finish that draft, it's done. So yeah, my first
moment then reaching the end and then being
I don't know, because then the real work's beginning, because you're going to get your edits back from your editor.
It's a very brief reprieve.
A month or something without too much thinking. So this is a mean question that I thought of when we were in the green room before, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So you have quite different UK and US covers, both of you. Would it be such a crime for me to ask which are your preference? Karen, or you can just say some pros and let's not say cons, they're all brilliant, but which speak to you more?
I could never choose because I think mine are both brilliant, but I think they're brilliant in different ways. I think the US covers, they tend to be like a little bit more colorful. They've always got this like mysterious personal element to them. I remember first seeing One of Us is Lying, and I had no clue what that cover should look like. And then they showed it to me with the, the sort of paper covering everyone's faces. And I was like, that's exactly what it should look like. The one thing I didn't want was people, like to see faces, because I want people to sort of guess the characters. And then with the UK, you just have this beautiful, like very simple, but very effective, very striking cover. And I love the white, I love the foil, the sprayed edges. It's always exciting to see what the color is going to be. My readers like to try and guess. Now 5 books in, we're running out of colors.
5, so I don't know how many colors there are. You're going to have to start doing shades of red or something.
Right. I feel like we already do have like sort of shades of blue. So I think there's still a lot of room for us to maneuver along the color spectrum.
Yeah, actually, It's interesting. Your US covers, now I think about it, it's almost like your brand is like mysterious photograph, but the faces are covered somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. And Ruth, yours are quite different as well from the UK to the US. In quite a similar way, actually. I'd say your UK ones, like Karen's, are quite like graphic and bold, and there's like a pop of colour. So
yeah.
Are you going to give me a half answer like Karen, where she didn't commit either way?
I'm not. Well, maybe we should throw it open to the audience. So some of my covers are very different. So I'm going to do you a little visual here.
Side by side.
So this is the turn of the key, American and British. But one by one, in hardback at least, has one of the most similar treatments. So this is the American, so big avalanche, and then this is the can't really see it's reflecting. This is the British one. So actually, for the first time ever, they went for a very similar idea of like snow, big letters, kind of bluey, sort of snowy. So I love both of these, but the British have gone with a completely different look for I don't know if you can see for the
they have.
yeah, so it's got the same visual as the hardback, but they've gone for this very kind of gorgeous candy color purple. So no,
I like that.
just as I'm not, I would never say if I had a favorite child. I don't, for the record. Both my
Well, you're not going to
children
like a question I've got coming up then. In fact,
which is my favorite child. That's why they're not watching.
Yeah. No, so you've now, between you, Karen, I think this is your 5th book. I'm very bad at math.
Is
Ruth, I think this is your 6th, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yep.
So you've got quite a few books now. Picture this scenario. All of your books are hanging off a cliff and you're there and you can only save one. And you're not allowed to give me a half answer. You can only save one book. And I don't know what happens. I guess the rest fall out of existence when this copy falls. So Karen, which book do you save?
I would probably lunge for Two Can Keep a Secret. That is a very special book to me because I feel like it's the book that made me an author. Like, I mean, One of Us is Lying is the book that launched my career, but that was a bolt of lightning book. It came to me almost fully formed. It was sort of easy to write. Everything about that book was easy. And I thought, oh, look at me, I'm good at books. But Two Can Keep a Secret was a fight every step of the way. It was a typical second book. I rewrote it 3 times. It was hard. I was having conversations with my agent, like, maybe I just can't do this and I should only have one book ever. So to like make it through that and end up with a book that I'm proud of, that book's just really special to me.
That's because that one was kind of the biggest struggle, but it kind of taught you a lot of lessons about.
Yeah, I mean, it really taught me that I could do this job. And there's been so many times since then where, the writing gets a little bit tough and all I have to do is look back at that book and think, it's okay, you'll get through this.
Survived it. I feel like you have to tell yourselves a lot that when I just started writing my current book now, at the start I was like, oh, how on earth do you do this? And I was like, you did this last year, you must be able to. But every time, I don't think that goes away really. But Ruth, same question to you. All your poor little book children are hanging off a cliff. You can only save one. Which one do you save?
Well, obviously, the real true answer that any writer would give would be the one that they're halfway through writing, because that's the one that you're terrified of losing. You're emailing it to yourself every night. Yeah, because you're like, I can't go back and write all of this again. So yeah, if it was all of my books, including the one that I'm working on at the moment, without a shadow of a doubt, I would be lunging for that USB stick. No, don't go.
Is that also your current favourite? Maybe then. I know it's hard to say nice things about a book when you're writing it because it's basically impossible, but
yeah, it's very difficult. So every single book that I write, at the beginning you're in the honeymoon phase and you think this is going to be the best book I've ever written, and then about 2/3 of the way through you're like, this is definitely the shittest book that I've ever written. And usually at that point I go back and look at the messages that I sent to my friends where I was like, this is probably the shittest book I've ever written, and it was always like at the same point. And then when you get to the end, you're just so grateful that you finished this and crossed the finishing line that you have no perspective on it whatsoever.
No
just like, I just don't care. So yeah, I don't think it is my favorite at the moment. I know this is a non-answer. I don't really have a favorite book, but I would say very similar to Karen. The Woman in Cabin 10 was my hardest book to write, because In a ... Wood was doing so well, much better than I think, to be honest, anyone had really expected. And, these film offers were coming in and my agent was phoning up to say, like, Reese Witherspoon's read it and she loves it. And I was just like, I should have been so pleased by all of this. And obviously part of me was, but the other part of me was feeling worse and worse about this very ugly duckling book that I was working on at the same time. And I threw everything into that book. I think I was just so scared that I would be a flash in the pan. And I really, really wanted to prove to people that I could write a book that was just as twisty and just as exciting and just as compelling as In a Dark, Dark Wood. And it turned, The Woman in Cabin 10 turned out to be a much bigger seller in the end. So I guess on some level it worked. But I think, you know, after that, I kind of calmed down a bit and I was like, it's fine. I can leave it for more than 3 pages without an explosion. My readers will trust me and kind of go with me a bit. So, yeah.
Interesting. So Ruth cheated because she picked 2. That was not the assignment.
Sorry.
But as you mentioned,
Holly, keeping us accountable.
Yes, like always. Yeah, keep you in check. As you mentioned there, Ruth, about, you know, TV and film options. I know that Karen, the first season of One of Us is Lying just came out in October, I think. Although I haven't found where I can watch it in the UK. That's going to be my assignment over Christmas. Find where I can watch that. But I don't even know what Peacock.
I think it's not there yet.
Oh, come on, Karen.
There is gonna be some news, but I can't talk about it yet.
No, very mysterious. Throw us a bone, Karen. Okay, I will wait in anticipation. But I wanted to know, like, how much involvement you had. Do you read scripts before? Did they ask you about casting, or was it kind of sell the rights, done? It's nothing to do with your book. How involved were you in the process?
Yeah, I was a consultant, you know, which was kind of like what was offered to me and what I accepted at the time. I was like, sounds good to me as a baby author. I was given some input, you know, I gave the producers kind of like a list of iconic moments that I was hoping would make it into the show, and some of them did. I wasn't involved in, you know, kind of studying the creative direction for the show, but I did get a chance to read scripts and return feedback, you know, which isn't always the case. I wasn't involved in casting, but I did get to see the audition tape. So it was that sort of thing. And I think, you know, the show did a really nice job of staying true to the book while also becoming, you know, very much its own thing and setting itself up potentially to continue. But I think, like, going forward for me, one of the things that I kind of learned is I would like that earlier involvement. So I do have another one of my books in development. Can't say, hasn't been announced. And as we know, sometimes these things go nowhere, but I do have an executive producer role on that one. And that's been really satisfying to kind of, you know, be part of that strategy up front.
So you learned that you wanted to be kind of involved in the process, you know, from the start.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I could have known that without having, you know, sort of gone through it. And
if anyone throws you a bone, you're like, oh my God. Yes.
Right, sure.
You have no idea how the book's going to sell when it actually comes out.
Yeah.
So, well, and did you like the TV show? I mean, you're not going to say no, okay?
I think watching.
Yeah,
Let's scroll down the bottom.
Was it a weird, like, surreal
Who's
experience? Seeing your moments and real humans are there saying your silly little words.
So surreal, so surreal. I remember going to the pilot shoot in Vancouver, and they've got this whole street blocked off and they're building sets, and there's people with headsets and clipboards, and Jennifer Morrison is over there because she directed the pilot. And I'm like, how is this? All these people are here because I wrote a book. That is just wild to me. And the cast is just lovely. And the way that they bonded with each other felt so similar to how my characters come to rely on each other. And I thought that was really great.
Yeah, it must be very weird. Well, fingers
so
crossed.
Weird.
Season 2. I'm sure you probably can't say anything if you do know anything, but fingers crossed. And I'll await the UK distribution news eagerly. And Ruth, I know that a few of your books have been optioned for TV and film. Can you tell us anything about the process or any progress on that, or are you tight-lipped and you're not allowed
Yeah,
to?
it's just the most secretive industry. It's really weird. Everything that you're told, but you can't, you know, share this. So it's like, and then I get totally paranoid about the snippets that I can share, because I'm like, can I, or am I misremembering that? Maybe that was a thing that I wasn't. So I'm always a bit scared to say anything. But yeah, but several of my books have been optioned either for film or TV, but none of them have made it over the finishing line yet. So yeah, it feels a bit like having lots of horses in a race and kind of I keep looking over and one of them's edging ahead and the other one's, you know, fallen behind a bit because it's gone into development hell or whatever. So yeah, basically, who knows? Like Karen, I've never been very involved, and as time has gone on and more of my books have been optioned, quite often I've been asked if I want to be involved, and often if I want to write draft scripts and stuff. And I've always said no, partly because I'm so busy and I don't know anything about writing scripts. So I think I just cut and paste all the dialogue and then be like, sure, job done. That's how it works?
Is this good?
Yeah, this is great, isn't it? So yeah, I've always said no, but now I'm a bit, having listened to Karen's answers, I'm like, maybe I would like to be involved. Perhaps I've said the wrong thing over all of these options. So yeah, I don't.
So there's stuff going on in the background, but you're not allowed to say in case someone comes to your house and kidnaps you in the middle of the night.
Almost certain to happen. Yeah,
I would say like you too, Holly, right? You've probably got some stuff going on, but can't talk about all of it.
Again, probably not allowed to talk about it, but that's why I was kind of interested to ask you, Karen, because I was comparing how experiences are going. But things are happening, but who knows? They might not go anywhere. But it's fun. It's quite fun seeing people's like interpretation of your words. At times not fun, but there we go. That's the business, isn't it? You have to let it go. And I'm a bit of a control freak, so it's not easy for me. And I will open up to the question and answer box in a second. I just have one last question, which was, I don't know if you know this Family Guy meme where like Peter Griffin is watching a film and they say the title of the film in the film and he goes, and I noticed that in both of your books, you both drop in the title of your book twice, I think. Karen, you have a character who says, "You'll be the death of me," twice, and Ruth, I remember reading it at least twice that it said one by one. So I wondered what happened first. It's a chicken or an egg situation. Did you come up with the title and be like, oh, I've got to drop it in there somewhere, or were these lines already organically there and you stopped and went, hold on, that would make quite a good title? So Karen, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, the last one you mentioned, oh, that would make a good title. That happened with One of Us is Lying. That's where that came from, because it was a line in the book and I realized it would be a good title. With this one, I actually came up with the title first because it's something that used to be said to me a lot growing up, and I think it's certainly meant to express annoyance and frustration, but there's also affection behind it. And this notion that if I weren't so invested in you, you wouldn't frustrate me so much. And I thought that was just a great kind of, phrase for these three, and not only their relationships with their families. It's the grandmother of one character who says it to him all the time, but with each other. If they weren't so good at pushing each other's buttons, they probably wouldn't care as much as they do.
And Ruth, what about you? Where did one by one come from? Was it chicken or the egg? Which came first?
Well, so originally it was called the Black Run, because there's an iconic black run in the book, but my editors were a bit concerned that for anybody who wasn't a skier, they might not know what a black run was. It might not suggest very much. So then we had this whole thing of like coming up with other titles, and that's always a nightmare. If you've got a great title right from the beginning, it just flows. And if it's not right at the beginning, then it just becomes the worst experience in the world. Well, no, obviously that would be like having one of your family kidnapped, but it's second to that. And
second.
It went on for a really long time, and then we all loved One by One. I can't remember who came up with it, but everyone was like, yes. And then I was like, I probably do need to drop it into the book. So one character says it at one point, and then someone reviewed it on Instagram the other day, and they were like, if I had one criticism of this book, it would be that the characters say one by one a few too many times. And I was like, I don't remember. I like, there were others. So clearly it was in there already. I didn't need to go and drop it in.
Yeah, it was twice, because I counted it as well. I was like, because I just got this meme in my head of Family Guy. So whenever I see a title mentioned in the media, I'm always like
ka-ching.
I clocked it this time. So yeah,
but there you go. That was a complete accident. So yeah.
So twice was too much for this reader.
Yeah, no, they just
also, on the subject of Karen's title, my favourite Irish expression is the Irish equivalent of "you'll be the death of me," which is "I'll swing for you," which means I'm not going to say it in an Irish accent. I will murder you and be hung for your murder. So that could be the sequel. I'm just offering it up there, Karen, if you need.
Wow, I appreciate that. Now I've got the title for book 2. Fantastic.
I'll definitely need to use that expression at some point.
That's so good.
So let me scroll through some of the questions. Yes, this is one I should have asked. Thanks for reminding me, GM it. Well, they say, question for Ruth, what and when is your next book, please? But I'm going to open it out to both of you. When and what will your next release be? When will we get our next Ruth and Karen goodie? So Karen, when's your next project coming?
Probably sooner than people expected, since I just had a book released last week. But my 6th book, Nothing More to Tell, is coming at the end of August in the US, which probably means it's coming a couple days later in the UK. That's usually how it goes. And this is about a teen journalist who investigates the cold case murder of her favorite teacher, whose body was found by her ex-best friend. So it's dual POV from both their points of view. And anytime he is asked about that day and whether there's anything else he can share to shed light on this tragedy, he always says, there's nothing more to tell. Can we believe him? We'll find out.
There's an AA moment there.
Oh, exactly.
So Ruth, what's your next project? When are we going to have your next book?
So my next book is going to be out next summer, August in the US, and no, maybe it's August in the UK and July in the US. Anyway, summer, let's just say. And it's called The It Girl, but I can't tell you very much about it. There's going to be announcements coming soon. So for anybody who's waiting, make sure you're keeping an eye on my Twitter feed, because it will be there and in my newsletter first. So yeah.
How mysterious. I'm very much looking forward to that. And Karen, I know you've confirmed, have you, that there's going to be a third One of Us book. So
yes.
Where are you in the process of that? Have you finished writing it, or?
I have drafted it. It's with my editor. So I am awaiting and, fearing that edit letter any minute now. At the moment, it's scheduled to come out at some point in 2023, but we don't have an official publication date yet.
And you're probably not allowed to tell me this, but in the way that One of Us is lying and One of Us is next, kind of like a few background characters from the first book became main characters in the second book. Is it that kind of thing again with the third book? Kind of like, I guess, would you call it like an anthology series or something? Or
no, it's actually going to have a mix of points of view from the first book and the second book. And then we're also going to have flashbacks from 2 characters who we have never heard from before, haven't been inside their heads before. So that was a lot of fun to write.
Very intriguing. So it's kind of like everything's coming home, coming full circle. We're revisiting our old voices.
Yeah. And what's kind of cool about this book is obviously I never intended to write a third book. I didn't even intend to write a second book, but these things happen. But the plot is kind of centered on a plot line that I had to edit out of the first book because it was distracting to the mystery, which was true. But it's kind of baked into the DNA of Bayview. So it was really easy to pull that out and turn it into a story.
Oh, I'm very intrigued. So a question from Kit Frick here, which I'm just going to paraphrase.
Okay.
Is they're mentioning the fact that with my books, I have to kind of Americanize the books, kind of set them in America. But for both of you, obviously, Ruth, your characters are British, whether they're set in England or not, and Karen, your characters are American, and you've also been wildly successful in both countries across the Atlantic. So when you are editing, are there any differences that, Karen, you have to make for the UK version to kind of make it understandable, and Ruth, same for you with the American audience? Is there any kind of things you have to change? I know setting obviously doesn't change, but do you have to do any kind of like de-Britishifying or de-Americanizing? So Karen, you first.
I don't do anything. And actually, I don't think anything really happens on my publisher's end either. I thought initially that maybe some of the spelling would change, just so that it would fit, like favorite would have a U. But I think they don't even do that. They just kind of take all of my Americanisms and plop it straight in there. Now, don't hold me to that. I haven't read one of them in a while. So maybe that's changed. But I myself don't do anything.
Oh, interesting. That sounds lovely. I do know that the one big difference between American and English books is in UK ones, we use single quote marks over dialogue, and in America they use the double. But I've never had to do that change because I don't know how they do it. That must be a nightmare. But
just do a big find and replace.
Yeah, but then you might be replacing like apostrophes or the
Right.
Oh, it's a different character. It's a different, but I'm very happy I don't have to do any of that.
I don't have to do that. So Ruth, do you have to do anything?
Yes, I do. I do quite a lot of work. So I try as hard as possible to make the 2 editions the same, apart from the favorite and favorite, that kind of thing, and the quotes, obviously. For the record, double quotes are better. I write in double quotes, so my English editors have to change them all to single.
I'm a single quote girl.
I prefer double. It's where my fingers go automatically and I can't teach myself how not to do it. So yeah, so that all just happens. I don't get involved in that. But the big issue is things that are confusing or unfamiliar to American readers, and where possible I try to come up with a middle ground. So like if a character is going to A&E, which is our accident and emergency, my American copy editor will usually change that to ER, emergency room. Obviously you would never have a British character saying let's go to the ER, so I then change it to hospital, because it's fine to say let's go to hospital, like exactly. But sometimes you just can, and sometimes I keep it British, so like my characters always throw away the rubbish, they never chuck out the garbage, because who would, we would never say that. If they wear pants, it's underpants.
That's confusing.
Yeah, very important. But sometimes there just isn't a middle ground, and it can, so very occasionally, like green man in America is walk signal, and there isn't a word that works for both, so they cross at the walk signal or they cross at the pedestrian crossing, and I just make my peace with that. But as far as possible, because I think it really irritates American readers who are very familiar with British culture when they read something that sticks out to them as an Americanism
that has like this kind of transatlantic hybrid version.
Yeah, but then having said that, it's funny because I occasionally get people complaining to me about the fact that my books have been Americanized, and usually I don't think they realize how much British young people in particular use American terms. So I had one person talking to me about the phrase redneck, and actually that's something we say in the UK because it's a great phrase and there's no British equivalent. So we will happily say redneck, and that was in the British, that was how I wrote it. It wasn't an Americanization. So yeah, it's always a really interesting culture clash moment. And it's never the things that I think will stick out that get, sometimes I remember one of my characters was said something about running someone down behind their back, which means like they're criticizing them behind their back, and the copy editor put in, is she cheating on him? And I was like, no, God, no, that definitely didn't come out. Like, so yeah, it's weird.
I've had lots of moments of that where we're like we speak the same language, how do we not understand each other? But I've now done 3 books where I've had to like translate it, so I now feel like I'm an expert in de-Britishifying and Americanizing stuff. And then actually it started, I'm turning American. The other day I just said sidewalk out of nowhere, and I was like, yes, it's very interesting. You learn lots of differences that are subtle and big. I wonder if we have time for one more question. I'll go for, are there any new types of genres or specific type of mysteries you would like to explore in the future? So I guess if you were going to write in a slightly different subgenre of mystery, would you kind of look to do some paranormal-y stuff, or you just want to stay into kind of like the real life thrillers? Or Karen, what about you? Have you thought?
I love what I do. I don't have current plans to change, but I will say, my good friend Tiffany Jackson moved over to horror with her latest YA, and I love horror. I don't know if I could pull it off, but it's one of those things that I think maybe someday. I thought her take on it was fabulous.
Yeah, I'd read that. You can do it, Karen. If you did book 2, you can do anything.
That's fair.
And Ruth, what about you? Because and Turn of the Key kind of had, a kind of supernatural vibe. It very much played on that kind of gothic horror versus terror. Which way will it fall? But have you ever thought about going like full ghosties and ghoulies, or? You like the
So
real world.
I have had my cake and eaten it in a little bit, in terms of I have kind of flirted with there's a bit of spookiness in The Turn of the Key. There's some kind of horror movie tropes in A Dark Dark Wood, which was very much influenced by, you know, Scream and all those movies where like the bad guys are looking in through the windows kind of thing. So I have kind of flirted with other genres, but the one that I have never written and would really like to, I'd love to write historical crime, and I haven't, just because of the amount of research involved. Frankly puts me off, and I have contemporary ideas, but it's definitely in the back of my mind as a thing I would like to do one day. So yeah.
Interesting. Watch this space. Let me see. I wonder if Ali's about to come on and tell me I've run out of time, but oh, she is. She's there. We're out of time.
I'm so sorry. I hate to interrupt. So I am just going to take these last couple of minutes to say a huge, huge thank you to all of you, to everyone who's joined us today. For all of you audience members who would like to get hands on copies of books that have come up, I'm going to go ahead and link these again so you're not scrolling through searching. Let's see here. I'm deleting numbers. There we go. There, that should work. Let us know, of course, audience members, let us know what you thought of this event, either in person or online. If you're not local, we always love to hear from you. Authors, this has been an absolute delight. What a wonderful way to spend a Sunday. For me, it's kind of morning / afternoon, though I'm sure that's not the case for everyone.
Ruth and I will be in bed soon, I imagine.
Totally. But thank you. Do you have any last words you'd like to share with us before we all wave goodbye?
Oh, I just wanted to say how much I loved Karen's book and what a joy it was to be here. So thank you for asking me.
And I am such a huge fan of you, Ruth. So it was wonderful to finally do an event with you. And Holly, I always love working with you because your books are some of my favorites too. And just thanks to everyone for joining us, and to Third Place Books for hosting.
And to Holly for the amazing questions. They were just fantastic. I felt grilled.
Yeah, that was the effect I was going for, grilled. Yeah, I mean, you sneakily got out of a few questions, but I'll allow it. Next time, I'll get you.
Maybe
well,
next
I can't
we'll
wait.
be interviewing you.
And I will say, no, sorry, I can't. I'm not allowed to say.
No
comment. Between my covers.
Well, wonderful. It was an absolute pleasure to be here. And I think that with the last thank you, it is time to let the awkward waving commence. So, shall we do our? Yeah, there we go. Have a good one, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Such nice.